A man was driving home from work one evening when he came to a railroad crossing. The traffic lights turned red, so he stopped the car in front of the tracks. He heard the bell ringing and saw the barrier slowly coming down. He glanced to his left and noticed a teenage schoolgirl hurrying down the sidewalk. When she saw the barrier coming down, she started running, trying to cross the tracks before the train came. Halfway across the railroad tracks, the girl suddenly stopped. Her foot was caught in a gate between the wooden slats and the metal rail. The train was approaching fast. The man watched in horror as the girl tried desperately to free her leg. He jumped out of his car and ran over to the barrier, waving his hands and shouting, attempting to warn the train driver. It was no use. The girl couldn't free herself and screamed out, "I don't want to die!" The man turned away and hid his eyes as the train thundered through the intersection. He cringed as he heard the girl scream, suddenly cut off by the deafening clack, clack, clack of the train on the tracks. As the train roared off into the distance, he gingerly opened his eyes and forced himself to look. He braced himself for the terrible sight he was expecting to see, but the railroad tracks were completely empty. There was no sign of the girl's mangled body. There was no blood at all. He looked around, wondering what had happened to her. Where could she be? Did she manage to free herself in time? Just then he noticed a small marble plaque on the wall between the barrier and the railroad tracks. It was surrounded by flowers and burnt-out candles. The inscription on the plaque read, "In loving memory of our darling daughter, who was taken from us much too soon. Rest in peace." A young man named Charlie got a new job with a cleaning company. He had to work all night cleaning office buildings after the executives have gone home. Because he was new to the job, he was being trained by an old man named Zeke. One night, Charlie and Zeke were cleaning the men's bathroom in the basement of a big office complex. Suddenly, Charlie heard a loud scream coming from somewhere close by. He ran out of the bathroom into the hallway. The screams were coming from the woman's bathroom next door. Charlie opened the door and looked inside. There was a young woman standing there, weeping and clutching herself. Her clothes were torn. "Are you okay?" asked Charlie. "Someone's in the toilet," she screamed. "He grabbed me." Zeke appeared at the door and said, "Charlie, what the heck is going on?" Suddenly, all the sinks in the bathroom began spraying out water. With that, the young woman began screaming and crying hysterically. She rushed past Zeke, fleeing out of the bathroom door. Charlie could see that one of the stalls in the basement bathroom was closed. He approached it cautiously and peeked under the door. He couldn't see any feet. "What's wrong, Charlie?" asked Zeke. Charlie gently pushed the door of the stall. It slowly creaked open to reveal an empty cubicle. There was nothing there. Breathing a sigh of relief, Charlie went around to all the sinks and turned off all the taps. "What was that all about?" asked Zeke. I don't know," said Charlie. "It's very strange. Something caused all those taps to start spraying out water. It's creepy." "I heard stories," said Zeke. "Years ago there was a murder in this office building. They told me it happened in the ladies' bathroom late at night. The basement bathroom. They say it's haunted and the murderer was never caught." "I don't believe in ghosts," said Charlie. "There has to be some logical explanation for why all the taps in the sink suddenly turned on. It wasn't supernatural, but whatever it was, it sure scared that woman." "Who?" asked Zeke. "The woman who was screaming," replied Charlie. "She ran right past you." Zeke's eyes grew wide as he whispered, I didn't see any woman, Charlie. I didn't hear anyone screaming. You and I are the only ones in this building. Joseph was running down the street, but he had no idea why. His heart was racing, and all he could hear was his heartbeat in his ears as he ran down the cobblestone street. Was he dreaming, or was he awake? Was all this really happening, or was he just having a nightmare? He wasn't sure. It was night and the sky was pitch black. The only light was coming from the street lamps which illuminated the deserted and unfamiliar streets. He didn't recognize any of the streets. He didn't know where he was, but yep, he kept running. He didn't remember where he had come from, and he had no idea where he was going. He just knew that he had to run. Something was after him. Something horrible, something unthinkable. He had to get away. If this was a dream, then why couldn't he wake up? If it wasn't a dream, then where was he and how did he get there? He turned a corner and saw that there was a man standing at the end of the street, so Joseph ran up to him and asked him for help. The man turned around and grinned. His grin became wider and wider, revealing a set of razor-sharp teeth. They looked almost like shark teeth, and that's when Joseph noticed his eyes. They were completely black, cold and dead, like the eyes of a shark. Joseph ran. He ran up one street and down another. He came to a dead end and quickly turned around and ran the opposite direction. He kept looking over his shoulder, worried that the man with the teeth was following him. Just then, he bumped into someone. He looked up and saw it was a policeman. With a sigh of relief, Joseph asked the policeman for help. The policeman turned around and grinned. His grin became wider and wider, revealing a set of razor-sharp teeth. They looked almost like shark teeth. And that's when Joseph noticed his eyes. They were completely black, cold and dead like the eyes of a shark. Joseph ran. He ran through an alleyway and jumped over a gate. He ran down a narrow road and came out onto a darkened street. Then he realized the street looked familiar. He had been here before. He was sure of it. He lived near here. As he ran, he could see his house up ahead. Joseph awoke with a scream. He realized he was back in his own bed. It had all been a dream. His heart was beating fast and he was covered in a cold sweat. But he was relieved to be home, safe and sound, in his own bedroom. His parents came running into the room, a look of concern on their faces. "What's wrong?" asked his mother. "I had a nightmare," replied Joseph. "What happened?" asked the father. "I kept seeing people with sharp teeth and I kept running away. No idea where I was going, but I knew I had to run," said Joseph. His mother and father both grinned. Their grins became wider and wider, revealing two sets of razor-sharp teeth. They looked almost like shark teeth, and that's when Joseph noticed their eyes. They were completely black, cold and dead, like the eyes of a shark. "Why do you keep running away?" asked his mother. "You know you can't escape," said his father. There was a teacher who had exactly 30 students in his class. He had a reputation for being very cruel and strict. Sometimes, when his students misbehaved, he made them stay back and study until late at night in the library. In order to make sure his students actually stayed there and didn't sneak off or go to sleep, he gave them his cell phone number and instructed them to call him at certain times during the night and tell him their student number. This went well for a while, but one night he received a strange call. He answered as usual and heard a girl's voice mumbling, "Hi, teacher. I'm number 31. Before he could say anything, she abruptly hung up on him. At first, he didn't even realize, but then he felt furious as he thought one of his students was playing a joke on him and taking him for a fool. The next day, he stormed into the classroom and demanded that the student who pulled the prank stand up and take responsibility for it. The classroom went silent and no one stood up. All of the students denied knowing anything about it. He threatened the whole class, telling them that he would beat them if it happened again that night. Unexpectedly, it did happen again. At exactly the same time, he received another phone call. Again, it was the same girl's voice, and she said, "Hi, teacher. I'm number 31. He tried to ask the girl to tell him her name, but she hung up before he got the chance to open his mouth. The next day, he made good on his threats, and he beat the students in the classroom one by one, demanding that someone own up. Of course, no one did. He even went so far as to go to other classes and ask them about it, but no one would admit to anything. The calls continued every night, exactly the same way. The teacher was going out of his mind. Then finally, one night before the girl hung up, he managed to ask, "Who are you?" In a weak voice, the girl replied, "I'm in your class. Teacher, you know me." "My class only has 30 students," the teacher shouted. "Stop trying to trick me." The girl just said, "I'm always watching you during class, teacher, but you always turn your back on me. I want to see your face." Then, once again, she abruptly cut off the call. The teacher changed his behavior. He told his students that he wasn't going to make anyone stay back after class anymore. He even went so far as to change his cell phone number, but the calls continued. Eventually, the teacher couldn't take it anymore. The calls were driving him insane. He retired shortly afterwards. A few months later, the school underwent renovations. While the builders were replacing the blackboard in the teacher's old classroom, they were shocked by what they discovered. Hidden in the wall behind the blackboard was the dead body of a young girl.